So, I have a blank sheet of paper in front of me as the agenda, so I guess we'll start this discussion. It's to revisit our previous topic that we had, I think 4 weeks ago. I don't remember the exact date, to kind of figure where we are today, being today, is it the 14th? 14th of May, what roadmap we should think about going forward as a planning board, as we might be coming out of a restricted environment or not, and what our decision making might be as to public hearings, having them, not having them. And so, Lisa, I'm going to direct it toward you so you can bring us up to date if there's any changes or what your thought process is.
There are no changes. It's all, the order still stands, or the special legislation still stands, because some communities are having meetings, some communities aren't having meetings. I think that as we go down this, I think everybody understands this is going to be longer than than what people originally thought, but it's going to go on for a while. I don't know if the format for meeting will change at all. I don't know that, the governor, the legislature is going to revoke the remote participation anytime soon. I think given the caution of the governor, he's not inclined to encourage meetings in person. But so I don't see any end in sight right now.
And is there any sense of direction from the Attorney General on position, how things might be interpreted or not interpreted?
No, and I will tell you that meetings run the gamut. There are people that their talents just do their best, and there's, minimal ability to participate. I have meetings like this when the chair never says to anybody, you can call in if you can't hear, you can do this and participate, by pressing *6 and raising your hand, to people who are very detailed, all through the meeting. If you're calling in on this meeting, this is how you can participate. I have meetings that you can't see anybody on the screen. You can't see anybody's names. All you see are the plans that are before the board. So it runs the gamut. I think the most inclusive meetings that I have seen, either representing a community or being in front of a board, are the ones that are on a Zoom type platform, where they're also broadcast on local cable access. And so what happens with that is that a person who may not have internet connection or computer can watch it on local cable access and can call in at the same time. And so they can participate. Town hall is going to be, workers are going to go back to work at town hall soon. It won't be open to the public, but they will be able to provide materials to the public. And then, what'd you say, Martha? In June, it's going to be open by appointment only?
So based on the manager's meeting that we just had at 2 o'clock today, we will be, as Lisa said, the employees will be back in starting on Monday, all of us. And but it will continue to be closed to the public at least until June 1st, at which time people might be able to make appointments to come in and see us, but there's no clear date as to when we might actually start holding meetings again.
So my point with having Martha add that detail is that if let's say somebody gets a public notice about a hearing, they have the ability now to go in and get plans where they didn't, because town hall's closed, right? So once Monday happens, and certainly after June 1st, they have the ability to call up to an employee and say, can you review this plan with me? Can we have access to the plan? Can you send it out to me? Can you leave it at the door? That access didn't occur, isn't in existence today and wasn't 4 weeks ago. I think also the risk, so you have certainly the fundamental issue of making sure all of the public can participate, right? That's a fundamental issue. in the current times, are we going to be able to accomplish that without question? Probably not. From a cost perspective and a defense perspective, let's say you make a decision and the neighbors appeal a decision. Well, the developer has to defend that decision, not the board. We go along for the ride, but the developer pays to defend that decision, not the board, right? So if the developer is pressing to go ahead, it's their risk that somebody's going to appeal the decision. If somebody files an open meeting law complaint, I can defend that all day long because you're doing exactly what everybody else is doing. And so long as we post things properly and try to be as inclusive as possible, I don't see how the Attorney General's office finds against the town.
Martha, we have the capacity to do both Zoom and broadcasting at the same time. Would that'd be cable broadcasting? Would that also be live YouTube, or would YouTube be after the fact?
I would have to check with Susan on that. I know that the intention was to broadcast live on cable access, but I don't know if it's also being done on YouTube or some other means. And I know that any broadcast is not being done for all meetings. I think if it's happening, it's only for the planning board and for the selectmen right now. But I definitely need to check with Susan to find out what's set up.
Well, appreciating that this process is probably going to be going on for a while. We're not going to be having people meeting close to one another. And the fact that many communities have moved towards holding hearings, and if we do our best to construct a medium whereby we have cable access, possibly YouTube live access, telephone call-in, if that's a possibility, with Zoom and Zoom involvement, I think we're doing the best that we could to conduct business and allow as much public comment as possible. Not 100%, because we can't allow face-to-face in person if somebody wanted to be there, but it's the next best thing given the circumstances, I think. So I'd like to kind of poll people, see where they're at, see if they feel that we should, at this point in time, since it looks like we're going to be continuing with these parameters, if we should start to hold public hearings. So let me start first with Larry.
Actually, if I could go back to Lisa, on your point, Lisa, about an appeal by an abutter or some other interested party, presumably what they would have to do is challenge the special legislation on some sort of due process grounds. Is that
I think that
fair reading?
Well, they would have to do, yeah, they would have to have, I think whatever action, it would be a number of counts, Larry. I think that they would have to find some fault in a decision based upon failure of due process, right? So they would challenge the legislation. They would challenge your decision because it wasn't inclusive. They would challenge, under the open meeting law. So yes.
And if we were to deny it, if we were to deny a petition and it was the petitioner who appealed, would be looking at the same issues essentially, or?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, I think that in that instance, that's why I think you give the petitioner the choice, right? And we didn't talk about this, but I think you say to the petitioner, we're willing to go forward, but you need to know that this is the format we're in and you're going to, you're subject to appeal. And so if they have the choice to go forward, then it would be a hard argument for them to make that somehow they were prejudiced by holding a meeting.
I see. Yeah. And a little off Pete's question, but is there a scenario where the restrictions are lifted at the state level, but not at the local level? And I guess would pretty much be between a rock and a hard place in that situation.
Well, so the restrictions that's a problem for you right now is the meeting of more than 10 people, right? That's the problem for you. And so if that gets lifted, it's going to get lifted presumably everywhere. Maybe not. I mean, for example, that doesn't apply to town meetings. The legislative body is an exemption from people, more than 10 people meeting in any one place. So I guess he could lift it insofar as, necessary to carry on public hearings, and then withdraw the remote participation exemption that he did at the same time. So, but that's the problem that you have right now, is the more than 10 people in any one
Right.
location.
May I ask, if you were to lift it and more than 10 people try to get in, it would become a liability if anybody else became infected, if they came into a meeting in a public face-to-face type of thing.
If the governor lifted it and allowed more than 10 people?
Well, wouldn't I don't know, does the town still have a liability to keep the citizens safe, so that basically, would everybody have to be at least tested, wear masks, tested as far as like temperature and things like that are concerned before they could enter into a public meeting?
Right. So it's a really good question, Leslie. I suspect that if the governor is going to lift the 10 person limit on social gatherings, or whatever he does, they're going to continue to recommend social distancing, right? So they may limit, they may say, oh, you can have more than 10 people, but when you go into the room, you have to be 6 feet apart and everybody has to have a mask. Okay. So they're not taking people's temperatures that walk into public buildings right now, or, Market Basket or whatever. They're just telling you gotta wear a mask, right? So I don't know what the protocols will be, but there won't be liability on the town. I mean, the town's going to take the town's going to take their direction from whatever the governor says. It would be unusual for a town, but not necessarily they wouldn't do it, to say, well, too bad, we're going to limit the meetings to 10 in here. We lost Pete.
So if you went to something like that, I mean, people could submit to be like a proxy type of thing and send a surrogate in to represent them to keep the number of people down at a meeting.
Well, yeah, they could if they wanted to, but I think that if you're going to have public hearings in person, you can't discriminate on who can come in.
Okay.
I mean, so if you're going to start having public hearings in person, the meeting has to be open and be held in a location that can accommodate the public social distancing policies in place. Pete, you're on mute. But right now, I don't even think we're close to that. I don't foresee the governor, although you never know, I don't foresee the governor on Monday saying, okay, I'm going to lift the 10 gathering people limitations. I don't see that happening on Monday.
No.
Yeah, seems highly unlikely.
Right.
So I apologize. I had an internet connection failure, which actually is a consideration in this venue, because we're conducting stuff and people are talking, then all of a sudden people aren't talking. And, I mean, that's the best we can do. And I don't know if we can all potentially hardwire. I was thinking about that as this thing went down. So I apologize, but it's a consideration as we do our meetings, because I've had this.
There have been meetings that have canceled, right? So there are meetings that you'll be in the middle of a meeting. I have had one that kind of paused. I haven't had any canceled, but I have heard about one or two. You're in the middle of a meeting and there's a significant technical problem and you have to move. Yeah, somebody has to continue the meeting. You just can't go. That's what happens.
Right.
So Larry, back to the polling, the question of comfort level of transitioning from our current position. What are your thoughts?
Well, maybe we can just think through our options, Pete. I always find that helpful when I'm having a difficult decision to make. Option one is to continue on with what we're doing. Okay. Option two is to modify our procedure going forward to take up matters more routine in nature that do not involve a public hearing. Okay. Option three is to open it up to everything and continue on, you know, and hold our hearings in this venue. And the fourth option, one frankly I hadn't thought about until this afternoon, is the one that Lisa suggested, is involving the petitioner in the conversation as to whether or not they want to go forward under these circumstances. The difficulty, of course, in all of this is not knowing when we can resume live meetings. That's not an answer to your question, Pete, because it would be so much easier to know, well, if mid-June we can start live meetings. It seems highly unlikely though, doesn't it? Seems highly unlikely that that's going to be the case.
Yeah, I didn't see it.
You know, I think intuitively we're looking probably at months of this type of environment. And
Then if that's the answer, we probably should begin to go forward with some of these things. That's kind of the way I'm feeling at this point. But I can be persuaded another way. I'm honestly on the fence.
Just to add one consideration, and Lisa, correct me if I'm misstating this, but the current legislation is in effect as long as the state of emergency remains in effect or until the governor lifts it. So that's aside from any lifting of restrictions or whatever. So
Right.
that deals with tolling.
It's a long period of time, potentially. I don't see the governor lifting his state of emergency anytime soon. You know, one of the things you could consider is that you decide, let's say you decide you're going to go forward, well, schedule, in order to give people plenty of time, in order for Susan and Martha and whoever to work out the technological things, schedule your first hearing in June, right? So get out of May, schedule your first hearing in June, renotice the people that are going to be for that hearing, right? And maybe something will have changed and you'll slip into a public meeting. And if not, you'll have a meeting like this scheduled.
Yeah, I was thinking something along those lines as well. Give us some time to kind of get things in place.
And also time to notify people, right? If you decided today, you'll take up your first public hearing on June 10th or 15th or whatever the date is. You can send notice out to people that you're going to resume your public hearings, including the applicants and abutters, and try to get all your technology ready to go. And if something changes, then you can have a public meeting on that day. Great. If not, you've set this up.
The last place I would want to be is in the town hall meeting room with 50 or 60 people in a tight group, even though the 10 limit may have been lifted. There are other places in town possibly to meet at the, say, elementary school, in the gym, where you can separate people all over the place, or in the auditorium at the elementary school, where there can still be good separation, and after the number is allowed to be expanded, it'll be much safer.
George, that's a really good point. Maybe during that time period, right, you say it's going to be on Zoom unless, you know, the rules change, at which case we'll announce the location, you know, 48 hours
Right.
in advance. And then you would have the opportunity to work with the school, which of course is out of school, right? Work with the school to
Yes.
use one of their facilities. That's a good point.
If that were the case, and if we did have access to, let's say, Triton High School, which does have media capacity, then this could be broadcast on the cable channel. And I would think it would have the acoustic ability so that we'd be able to have a conversation and people could hear. It's very difficult to have a conversation in a gymnasium and for people to hear that appropriately. So maybe that's an avenue we should investigate.
they would have to turn on some of their facilities, the air conditioning systems, or at least air management systems, so we're not all sitting in an unbuilt box. You have to have air moving. But I don't want to get into the Biogen situation where there was a meeting and now everybody's getting sued. It's a liability issue. I don't think the town
Yeah,
should
I don't,
pick
thi-
it
I
up.
think George, yeah, I think George, maybe to Leslie's earlier point, I have to say, I just, we can all be optimistic. I just don't see the whole gathering thing changing by June. I
Yeah.
don't, because of all the things you've just said.
The governor's becoming more conservative than less. So
Yeah,
I think this is going to go on much longer, and I think he's concerned with states opening up where anybody can come across the border now into Massachusetts and could be bringing something in that we don't want around.
right.
I agree with that.
Okay, so I think I got a sort of maybe yes and no from Larry, if we try to continue. Okay,
I'm decidedly undecided.
I understand. You're an attorney.
No,
I'm
I'm inclined to begin taking the hearings.
Okay.
But I mean, if we're going to go all summer like this, I think we owe it to people to move some business along. Doesn't mean we have
Maybe with
to.
some- Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with the parameters maybe that Lisa's mentioned, that we tell the, applicant, the petitioner that, XYZ and, and those boundaries in place. George,
back
where
to-
are you with, go ahead.
I was going to say, back to Lisa's earlier point, we shouldn't start next week. We should pick a firm date down the road to give plenty of time for notice to get out to people. Say that as of such and such a date, we're going to begin to do this. I mean, believe me, if I had any comfort level that these restrictions would be lifted by the end of June or even the middle of July, I'd say let's hold off and continue what we're doing. But we could be into September by the time these restrictions are lifted, depending on the experience,
Good point. Thank you. Thank you, Larry. George, what are your thoughts?
I think we're stuck with the rules as they stand right now. We really depend on the governor. We can't make the governor change. The governor has to let us change by his permission. And that's what we're dealing with. And the whole point is to protect everybody. And it's a very unusual situation. So we have a very unusual situation for us in dealing with it all.
So do you think it would make sense for us as a board to consider maybe starting in June and opening up public hearings remotely as we are doing this right now?
Announced with the intention to do so, but there may be reasons you can't do so. And we don't even know what some of those reasons might be.
Not to be further, or not to kick the can down the road further, but the governor presumably is going to make an important announcement on Monday. We might table a discussion until our meeting next Wednesday and make a decision then. I don't know if we're going to be any better informed than we are today, but you never know.
Okay. But I just kind of want to get a litmus test from folks where people are at with this. Mary, what are your thoughts?
I think that many public meetings, when they are held, will be held in larger venues. And I agree that the space for the planning board meetings is not doable probably for another, what do we say, year? We don't know. It's a long-term proposition. So there'll be a lot of other communities looking at larger venues in order to hold public hearings when, and this is the most important thing to me, is that we are not really in charge of how this is handled. The governor is making the decisions. So we need information from the governor in advance of our making any detailed decisions. However, I think it is important for us to get going maybe in June at some point when staff has had enough time to resolve any technical conflicts that may occur, so that people can't say that they didn't have access or they had trouble getting access. And that's a hard thing to do. However, I think we need to get some business done. This can go on for a tremendously long time. And the holding some kind of public forum technologically would then be filled with caveats as well, that people would understand that we're doing the very best we can to accommodate everyone and make sure that everyone has access. And that's the best we can do. And those who are presenting proposals would understand as well, has been said many times. That's my feeling on it. So status until we can get this get ready technologically in June to start getting some business done. That's my sense.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Mary. Leslie, what do you think?
I really appreciate Larry's 4 points. My two favorite are 2 and 4. So a little bit of resuming and also allowing the those that are trying to get the planning board to hold open meetings to be able to have that ability to sign, to say, no, I would rather just sit and wait until we can do this in the old format that it was in. And I also agree too that I don't see that we're going to be opening up all that soon. I think what the governor has said is, and the lieutenant governor, that May 18th is just going to be kind of a jumping off point. It's not the end all. Let's just do it. Let's go on the road. And it's basically the same. We've decided May 18th is going to be the day that we start explaining how it's all going to work. So maybe we make an announcement for, you know, the second meeting in June, to that, with fingers crossed, we can resume the business as usual.
Thank you. Thank you. Woody, what are your thoughts?
Well, we meet like this on Zoom. We could do some business. I don't know. It's hard. It's hard because Larry had some good points about we got to keep moving. But if we had Zoom and the town channel going at the same time, is there a way for people to participate by telephone into a Zoom meeting that
There
doesn't
is.
have computer?
Yep.
There is.
There's numbers identified on all the Zoom your Zoom invites that you can call in. You would put that on your agenda. The chair would, repeat that a couple of times. I think for every hearing they would repeat that, so people know what to do. And you can actually raise your hand. You know how like there's a raise your hand function here. There you can actually raise your hand on a telephone call as well.
Okay.
Martha, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead, Larry.
I was just going to say, Martha, what are the other boards and committees doing? I know the ZBA is meeting tonight, but they're kicking everything over. And I think they're going to do the same thing with the 40B hearing.
Yeah.
So they're not going to take that. Is anybody, I mean, I know the selectmen, I have to, at least holding, meetings have to do things like sign payroll warrants and that type of thing. But is anybody holding public hearings?
So nobody, I know you're right. The ZBA is going to continue all the hearings that were on the agenda for tonight. I think they're still trying to figure out how to handle the 40B next week. Conservation, missed the April meeting. They're going to reschedule the meeting for May. So that involves a number of hearings on notice of intent applications.
Are they going to make any decisions on those? Or are they just going to kick everything over?
I think Doug is reviewing that right now. He was out of commission for a little while, so he's reviewing and deciding what the priorities are at the moment. So, and there's also apparently been some guidance from DEP for conservation commissions, which I haven't seen, which doesn't impact us. So I think, I think as far as public hearings are concerned, we in the ZBA are definitely in the same boat in terms of putting them off for the moment.
I just want to jump back down. Woody, did you finish with all that you wanted to say?
Yeah, well, pretty much. I agree with a lot of the things that being said, but I don't see us meeting in public, basically, for a while. And if we can inform everyone that wants to participate in our meetings, and they can participate by telephone or just simply watch on Channel 9 if they don't expect to speak. And we all work on Zoom, and the people that need to speak, if they're proposing something or they're in a butter or other concerns, they can join us on Zoom or via telephone. But it would take some coordination. It's not going to be easy to do that with a lot of people. There's what, 6 or 7 of us in this meeting. If there were 50 people in a meeting, it would be hard, especially with people that all want to say something. It could get confusing.
We can monitor the waiting room, and Martha, we can probably use staff to do that, right? To be screening and then pull people out of the waiting room for conversation.
Yeah, I think so. I think I've been including both Susan and Ethan on as co-hosts. So one of them, Ethan, would presumably be the one who would be with us, and he could probably handle that. But that's part of. Oops, go ahead.
I was going to say, so is that how it works? They would have a screen with all the public participants, and then would notify the chair if someone wants to speak. Is that how it?
Yeah, like right now I'm the host, and so I've got the whole list of participants up here, and I can see who's muted and who's unmuted. If somebody were to raise their hand, I would see that. We've disabled the chat sessions function, so basically, if people have questions, they need to verbalize it as opposed to writing it.
Right, but what's the waiting room, I guess, is what I'm asking, that was referred to.
So the waiting room is where anybody, well, you can call it whatever you want, but you can hold somebody in an area, or you can just contain all the conversation in the area. Now, there is a way where you can have chat going just to one of the hosts or to all of the hosts. And so we could have, chat questions going directly to a designated individual. And that person can then say, okay, this is going to be the next person that has a question or a statement. So
I mean, if you've got 24 people, participating, you're not going to be able to get them all up on the same screen. So,
Well, so you'd be surprised. I've participated.
just be very tiny people, right?
That's exactly what happened, and they scroll. So what happens is when the plans are on the screen, everybody moves to like the top or the side, and you can scroll through, except for the host, and there can be more than one host who can see everybody at one time. And so the biggest meeting I've attended, there were probably maybe 50, 55 people at it. It was a Conservation Commission meeting in Salisbury. And what happens is the hosts and maybe the chair, everybody's on mute, except for, I've either had everybody's on mute, except for the person speaking, or except for the board members. And then you have to, literally, you have to raise your hand, and it does keep it controlled. But the host and the chair, and I think when there's that many people on, it should be somebody other than the chair so they don't get distracted. But the chair would say to the host, okay, is anybody raising their hand? So does any board members have it? So you can keep it controlled that way. And you would be surprised. For me, it has gone smoother than I had anticipated. And it just requires patience.
Okay. Yeah, and just getting comfortable with the technology. So it can happen. I've been in large meetings, and it will function as long as you have 2 or 3 people, whether a host, a co-host, or two co-hosts with the host, just to control traffic. That's what it is.
Right. That's right.
So that's a learning curve, and we might be bumpy 1 or 2 meetings until we get there, but it's okay. So Martha, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm thinking it would make sense to, as Lisa suggested before, set a date, maybe in June, maybe the board's second meeting in June, to start holding hearings again so that we can get technology in place, get the word out, renotice if that's the appropriate thing to do. And I think also, as Larry suggested, as Leslie also thought, maybe it would also make sense for me to contact the various applicants to, let them know that it's likely we'll be continuing to hold meetings via Zoom remotely for some period of time. Would they like to have their hearings held starting in the second meeting in June, or would they like to postpone until some future time? Perhaps we could start doing some regular business in the first meeting in June, which will be June 3rd. But I don't think I think it would be good to basically handle next week's meeting the way we have been and continue things and have a better sense of a date at that point. We will know by then what the governor's guidance is going to be for at least the first phase of reopening. So anyway, those are my thoughts. Sorry, kind of rambling here.
So if we were to, continue along this thought process and we were to start in June, I would think it would be appropriate to limit our public hearings until we get very efficient at doing this. Maybe for our first meeting, it's one public hearing, see how we do, and if it works well. The second meeting, if we feel comfortable with 2 public hearings. Understanding that things will be continued, and we can find ourselves very quickly, into a backlog of 4 or 5 public hearings in one meeting, which I think would be very cumbersome, especially since we already have some.
We're already there right now.
Right.
Yeah,
And I don't want to clog us. I don't want us to get frustrated with the process or the technology. We have to be able to do appropriate decision-making conversation in a comfortable manner. So I think if that makes sense, those sort of parameters, we'd have to explain to folks that that's what we're going to roll out to the best of our ability.
Once we, assuming we go forward, and this seems, what I'm hearing, it seems to be the consensus. In as far as the backlogs go, and I'll just offer this, we could consider meeting weekly until we get caught up in the backlog too. But,
Oh, Larry, you were reading my mind. I thought the same thing, so because we were already getting into the point before all of this happened, that our agendas were growing leaps and bounds when we could hold the meetings in a public forum. But I mean, it's a matter on who's on board for it and who's not. But I would be willing to try it out, see if that works, so that we don't get so far behind that you're never going to have the ability to catch up in a timely fashion.
Okay, so I've heard that from Leslie. I've heard that from Larry. Mary, what are your thoughts if we had to go to a weekly meeting situation for a little while? Would you be
Makes
comfortable with that?
perfect sense.
Okay, and you're comfortable with that? Yep.
Indeed, I am.
Okay, George,
Yes.
comfortable with that? Woody?
Yes, could we also just deal with what we have on our plate now for public hearings and not taking anything on new for a while?
Well, you can't. So here's
I mean, for 2 months or something, not like a year, but to get through what we have and get set up, I guess is my point.
So here's the good news is the answer is kind of yes and the answer is kind of no. So you can't prevent somebody from applying, all right? Okay. But the good news is during this time period, because of the special act, basically all the deadlines that you have to meet for hearings and finishing up hearings, they're out the window until the emergency is over. So you can, people are allowed to apply and kind of get in line, so to speak. So you can't prevent them from applying, but you can push the newer applications out beyond what your current applications are. So I think the weekly meetings will help you kind of catch up and get back into that groove for sure. But you can't prevent somebody from applying.
So it would be like a moratorium on, so they could put all their paperwork in, but you could just explain to them that, your calendar isn't going to be in the near future. It might be a little bit down the road.
Yeah.
Until this is all lifted. Okay.
Right, and we're actually already doing that. We got the application for the 105 High Road OSRD. And so we're going to be getting a first round of peer review done on that, but we haven't even set a public hearing date or noticed it or anything. We're just, that's set aside for the moment. And we may also be getting the application for the gas station on Central Street, the new AL Prime gas station, which is special permit and site plan review. He's gearing up to submit next Wednesday, but is willing to hold off a little longer. And that one also we could just set aside for a while, as long as the legislation's in effect.
So basically, the order of things would be the non-public hearings, A&Rs and the like, then the open public hearings, and then get into the new stuff.
Right, and we've got several public hearings that are being continued. We have one that was scheduled to open but hasn't. That's the 108 Main Street. And then the new applications that have come in or will be coming in.
So Martha, how would you feel about weekly meetings?
If that's, I mean, I think that would certainly be preferable than trying to hold 2 or more public hearings in one session. I think trying to do that via Zoom would be, it's hard enough as it is. Doing it via Zoom, I think, would be tough. I could see possibly doing 2 depending on the nature, and it would be, I think it would have to be limited in scope and then continued, but I wouldn't want to see more than that. So weekly meetings, long way of saying weekly meetings are fine with me.
Lisa and Martha, could we start meetings, given this atmosphere, could we start meetings sooner than 7? Would that help? If we could have them a bit earlier, then they don't get into the midnight hour when they have in the past. Is that legal? Is that doable?
Yeah, I mean, even in non-Zoom times, I do have some boards that'll start at 5:30 or 6. People do it because they're waiting for people to get home from work and things like that, which of course,
Right.
not as many people are doing anymore, right? So it wouldn't hurt to, up to the board, but you could start at, 6, 6:30,
What about 5:30?
Well, that's certainly up to the board. You could absolutely do that. Here's the other thing you can do. The city of Gloucester has more Conservation Commission applications than any other town outside of the Cape.
Wow.
And their agendas, they meet twice a month. Their agendas are just packed.
Right.
They limit. I'm not suggesting that you do this because they limit each agenda item to 15 minutes, and that's it. They just 15 minutes. The bell goes off. You're done. You're just continued. I don't care if you're in the middle of your presentation. I don't care what you're doing. You're done till the next meeting. So I'm not suggesting you do that, but you could say, if it looked like you were getting too packed, you could say, you've got, we're done in an hour, we're done in 45 minutes, we're done in a half an hour, move on.
I want to see Pete handle that. Get that big gavel.
Wait a minute, I'll get it. It's in the closet. It is.
Well, you got to do what you got to do.
Uh-oh, there he goes.
Well, he's got one.
Oh, now he's frozen.
Well,
My gavel, actually, when I was in medical school, I was in an organization, and I went to school in Iowa. And so they gave me a gavel with a little, of course, Iowa sword hog. And so that was my gavel. So I could bring it out, and we
can't see
could.
it. Your video
There's
is
nothing to say
frozen.
we can't time things. I have no problem with that, quite honestly, because,
Fun-
discussions can be painful. I mean, long-winded discussions, especially if they're repetitive. I think my internet connection went.
There you
away.
go. Now
all
you're
right,
back.
you're back now.
You're back.
I have no idea what you heard or what you saw.
Oh,
It's okay.
we heard everything, but you were in your closet.
We didn't see your gavel, so.
Oh, you didn't see. So this is the gavel.
Oh, there
Oh,
you go. There
It
you go.
is. So it's actually, see, there's a little pig on there and everything. I mean, custom made from it. So anyways, yeah, so I do have the gavel. Okay.
Well, we can be flexible
So I
about
guess
all
to
this.
summarize, we feel comfortable as a board, starting to reactivate and get business going. We'll try to use technology to the best of our ability, and I think I'm once again frozen because everybody's not moving. Hopefully my audio is working.
Yeah, we
Audio.
can hear you.
Nope,
I-
back.
There you
yep.
go.
Were we able to hear the audio, or was that
Yes.
you
gone?
can hear the audio.
Okay, great. We'll look at our technology to see how we can make our technology work, combining both our Zoom and our cable channel to make sure that we have that. We'll see about having co-host or staff kind of monitoring our request as we get discussion questions when we have to have discussion points. And we'll start slow and we'll explore going to weekly meetings. We'll try to keep our agendas very manageable. And I am cognizant and appreciative of everyone's time. If we're going to be doing this, every week, I don't want them to go for hours. I want them to be time limited, with the understanding that this is the time to our business. And
Can we start sooner, Pete?
sure. I think 6 o'clock would be great. People might start back to work, and I do want to be cognizant if people are starting back to work. And I would sure that I would think they'd be kind of modified hours going back, anyways. And so we have that flexibility. Or if people are out in the nice weather and they want to enjoy some of it, we don't
Yeah.
kill it.
Yeah, I would be cautious about starting too much earlier, maybe
Yep.
6:30 or so, because people will be going back to work. But
Okay.
that said, if we're going to be diligent about setting timeframes, then hopefully, and only having one hearing a night, maybe some other general business or something, hopefully they won't go on for hours anyway. We can control that.
I was gonna say, maybe rather than scheduling public hearings 15 minutes apart, if we're gonna do more than one a night, schedule them at a more reasonable interval, but to follow Gloucester's example, and once, we bump into that next public hearing, that we, wrap it up for the earlier one and then go into the second one.
Well, one thing I was going to suggest is maybe we follow the example of some other communities or the Concom, and I think even the ZBA now. And rather than setting an individual time for each one, to set one time for all public hearings, and then they're
That's
just
right.
back to back and control the time that way.
Yeah, that way you don't have to wait. If you you can just keep going right through the meetings.
That's good.
Oh, that's
good. That makes sense.
interesting, yeah.
Okay.
What do you do for the person who wants to attend by Zoom, who is technologically inept? Do we offer assistance if necessary?
They can call it. They can call, I think, and the town can help walk them through it. They can call
Right.
on the phone and watch the TV if we're able to do that. So
Got it.
So actually, the TV channel is a great option for
Yeah.
anyone who's not comfortable using the technology.
right.
The only issue is if they don't have local access TV. I know people who have direct TV, and so they don't get Channel 9.
Right.
Well, that's right.
That's why the YouTube thing's important, right?
Yeah, so as long as they have a computer, they can,
Right.
we've kind of talked through the issues before, but, hopefully we can get 95% of the people. And if anybody wanted to, and I would be very happy to help a resident, I could do a trial Zoom with them to get them comfortable with it or whatever, so.
And it just occurred to me that smartphones are another solution,
Right.
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a Zoom meeting at 2 o'clock this afternoon with my fellow shop members, and I think there were 2 of them using their cell phone, so they had the
Okay.
ability to do it that way.
The medical appointments too. With your smartphone.
Yes, I've had one of those.
Yeah. So it's easy. It's easy peasy. There are lots of different ways. So
Lisa, do you have any other guidance or thoughts for us?
No, I think you've hit it all. I think it's a nice comprehensive plan, and I think it should be able to roll it out now that you have some time to do it.
Well, I want to thank everyone for taking time today to have this discussion. I think it's very, very helpful. And I think we can probably, on our Wednesday meeting, kind of lay out our plan. Martha, do you have any other thoughts?
Not at this moment. I think perhaps if you and I can touch base after about the agenda, because right now we do have 5 public hearings scheduled, so those will all be continued and we can iron out those.
Quick question. The public hearing, as far as the golf center is concerned, do we need to communicate with the Board of Selectmen on our plans to do a once-a-week meeting if the event that they want to jump in on that for the golf center?
I'll talk with Damon, well, I'll let Damon, Ellen, and Tracy know that. I mean, right now that's been continued to June 2nd.
Right.
So, so we'll take it, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the whole purpose of the suggestion about meeting once a week is just to give us some flexibility. Maybe we'll find we don't need it, you know, but at least it's nice to know that everyone's available. And if we really do get a log jammed, that, you know, we can start doing that.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think it will be a good way to handle it, because otherwise we'll be having some marathons that would be pretty difficult.
Okay. Well, everyone, thank you very, very much, and enjoy this beautiful day, because it is beautiful outside. Okay.
Good to see you
Thanks,
all.
Thank
Okay.
you, Lisa. Thank
Need a
you.
motion to
Thank you,
adjourn?
Martha. Thank you,
I would
Doug.
love a motion to adjourn,
Motion
sir,
to adjourn.
Vice Chair. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? All in favor? Roll call. Thank you, Larry,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Leslie,
Yes.
Woody.
Yeah.
I think we're good to go, and Pete says yes. Thank you very much, folks. Have a great day.
You
Thank
too.
you, guys.
Bye.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.